and welcome. You're listening to the Adam Messer Show here on WRUU. I'm here today with my special guest, Michelle Zeitlin. And Michelle, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
That's awesome. All right, so Sebastian, would you mind playing some live music for us, and then we're gonna start our interview with Michelle. Awesome. Thank you, Sebastian. I appreciate that. So, Michelle, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I have to thank you for having me. I'm in wind-blown Thousand Oaks, California, and the winds are about 28 miles an hour right now, so it was a
Oh,
little
that's crazy.
crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, could you give everybody a brief interview, or not interview, but overview, just kind of like a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, I think I was connected to you by our good friend Scott Musgrove, Dr. Scott,
Yeah.
who and Dr. Shiloh, who have a podcast called LA Not So Confidential. As another podcaster, I have a podcast called Passion to Power with Hollywood Insider with a little I, Michelle Zeitlin. That's me. I'm based in Los Angeles, California, in the suburbs here where the high winds are, Thousand Oaks. I've been a talent and literary manager now for a couple decades. I work with all the A's: actors, artists, authors, and activists. And I develop these clients, I represent them, and I market them for all media, for book publishing, for television, for film, for Broadway stage, and for the music recording industry.
That's a wide berth of different things. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and somewhere along the way inside of that, I also produce. And Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh and I, just before the quarantine lockdown here in California, had an opportunity to produce an original true crime show for a division of NBC, UCP, called The Story of a Killer. So that was my foray into producing true crime. They're regulars at it, being forensic psychologists, but I came at it from first representing them as their manager, and then also coming in as an independent producer. And I've produced a feature film with Warner Brothers called Liberty Street. And I'm currently developing a show called Chicks and Salsa, which is a bilingual Spanish-English television unscripted show.
Oh, wow. So unscripted is it like a reality TV type thing, or?
Yeah, it definitely falls within reality TV. Basically, scripted would be any kind of drama or comedy that you see that's based off of lines that writers come up with, and unscripted is based on characters. But there's some driven storylines, but basically real people reacting to real situations and how they react to one another.
Oh, very cool. So that's really neat. What side of the business do you enjoy the most?
I'm just a creative at heart, and the last year and just during the pandemic, it's been really exciting to produce this podcast called Passion to Power, because a lot of our industry just completely shut down.
Right, right.
Broadway shut down, theater, festivals, music, concerts. Television and film came to a halt until it started to kind of step back because of the quarantine initiatives and all of the COVID-19 protocols. So as that was coming back, I decided I want to maintain my creativity and I want to maintain my contacts and I want to leverage those contacts. So when the industry comes back, it'll be able to help my clients and my business.
Mm-hmm.
So I've talked to just amazing people this last year. You know, Kevin Beggs, the chairman of Lionsgate TV, just did one with Adam um, Bates with big ad agency, Kendra Levin, Simon and Schuster, Krishan Trutman. She now has her own imprint for BIPOC authors. So I've learned so much, and by having this podcast, it's kept me very connected, very creative, and very driven to try some new things. I feel like I'm always morphing.
Yeah, I had a really good time talking with Dr. Scott and Jason Usry when they were on. That was a lot of fun, and and obviously for the folks that listening at home, Dr. Scott enjoyed the show, and he was like, "Hey, you should meet my friend Michelle. We've been friends for a long time, and yada yada yada." And this is like actually about probably like 3 months ago, I think. And I was booked up for the show until today, so I'm really excited that you could be on the show today.
Yeah, it does feel like we talked quite a while ago, and then you kind of reminded me. I was like, "Wow, we're here already."
Yeah. That's how the time has been kind of going by, hasn't it? This last year has just been like, wow, it feels like it was just yesterday, but then at the same time, it was like it felt like 10 years ago. You know what I mean?
Truly, truly. By the way, I just misspoke. My guest was Andy Bateman, and I had another Adam on the show, and I crossed both their names. But it's Andy Bateman. It's Sid Lee, who's just amazing, and he's the CEO of the USA division, and Jonas Agan, Disney executive. And what I loved doing with Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh was learning the other side of podcasting, not only
Yeah.
the interview side, but the production side and how to hire voice actors, write the script, and the whole formatting is a little different than television and film. So it was a good educational experience as well.
Yeah. That's podcasting is not exactly the same as radio. It's not the same
Right.
as film. It just depends, I guess, when they have a script or if they don't have a script, or like kind of like with the reality TV, if they have a guided topic. Like with my
Right.
show, I do a conversation style, just casual conversation. I don't really have a script. I don't have like points. I'm like, hey, we're going to do ABC type thing. But if you have like a show, like for example with true crime, you have a topic. Usually it's going to be of a person or a situation or whatever, right? And so it can't be just like willy nilly. You can have some off script stuff too, but you're going to want to have like the story down and the different parts, or otherwise it's just kind of like a hodgepodge, and you're like, what is this? It's too hard to follow.
Yeah, well, we have been given, for the one that we were developing, the story of a killer, the idea actually came from the producers, but they loved the talent, being Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh.
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted, it was funny, we came in with a pitch to do a TV show based on their existing podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And then the producers turned around and said, well, what about this? We've kind of been toying with this idea, and could you come back and develop it? So it was a very exciting idea for us to play with, and then decide exactly how to tell the story, the format, the characters. Did we want to focus on contemporary crimes or vintage characters and crimes? So it was really left up to us, and that's kind of the fun creative of a development period.
Right.
And also just the negotiation of that contract went so fast. Typically, my deals take a little bit longer to negotiate, but it was very clear they were very motivated to get this done. And it remains to be seen what will happen, as productions start to come back, if they'll greenlight this one to move forward, because they seemed very excited about it.
Yeah, that's really a lot of fun. I mean, that sounds like it's going to be an interesting show, because they've come in stride with their podcast, and so if it's the same kind of format, I'm sure it'll be very popular with people.
Yeah, well, their format for LA Not So Confidential is more two forensic psychologists kind of doing a deep dive into the mind of a criminal,
Mm-hmm.
their nurture versus nature. And with the project we worked on, the story of a killer, we created kind of a mystery. So it was almost like you had to guess who that person was by the end of the
Oh,
episode.
okay.
So we did a lot of research on a real person, and then we created a script based on what this person had said. But this was all from news clips and FBI files. So we
Hmm.
really dramatically made it come to life. So it was a very different format, and it was really a great challenge.
I know true crime is really popular right now. So I think
Yes.
that'll be something neat to see when it comes out.
And actually, Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh did a radio slash podcast show with another friend who has a show called Dialogue, and her name is Rebecca Sebastian, and they introduced me to her, and then I was able to pitch Rebecca as a host for another show in New York. So it's a small world. They all
Hmm.
tend to know each other, you know. And she's a very talented host, and she had just before quarantine a killer thing going on in New York, all over New York, where she would have a trivia show called Yellow Tape, and people would get together in bars or clubs, and they would guess about who the criminal was
Mm.
with her game. And it was very, very successful. So we were also thinking of creating a show based on her initiative. And so I thank Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh for that introduction. But I saw their combined show in a Silver Lake restaurant a year before we ended up taking our idea to NBC. So you just
Oh,
never know
wow.
where your good ideas are going to come from or where you'll be inspired. And unlike the three of them, who are always in the true crime space, for me, it was something quite new. And I found it very dark, but just incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Got to do the station ID real quick. Everybody, you're tuning in today to the Adam Messer Show. I'm here with my special guest Michelle Zeitlin, and this is WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. So you've built a career that you work with a lot of talent, and you work with different people and acting and writing and things like that. Um, and you yourself are a creative person. How has that worked? Like, what spawned you to go from being just a creator, and I say just, but I mean like just working on your own creative endeavors, to wanting to help other people with their careers and being able to move forward with their creative endeavors?
It's a great question. I think I'm just as long as I'm around artists and creative people, I thrive.
Mm-hmm.
So I enjoy testing different skills and different knowledge sets. So being on the sales side is really about knowing how to pitch and position people. And I'm very good at that. And it's in my market, which is a niche market, you know, people who typically are triple threats, who can act, dance, and sing and tell stories through music and theater and television. You know, it's a very specific way of marketing talent. So you need to know how to do that and how
Right.
to communicate, and also to keep current with what are the projects. And since I have a journalism background and a writing background, but I also have an acting background and a dance background, I kind of come at it from all ends. And I also have a great filter because I really know what is good talent. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
word talent's a funny word, because just because you're talent doesn't mean you're talented.
Right. Right. Right.
And the talent can mean different things. And I also represent literary projects, and that was the newest endeavor within my company called More Zap Productions. I launched officially the literary wing in 2014, because what happened was a lot of the people that I was representing as actors started to write and produce and consult, and we wanted to develop special projects for them. So that's where getting back to your question, I get to put my creative hat on too, because I not only am facilitating their project, but I'm using my own creative ideas and innovation and experience to be able to broaden the story, to tighten it, to develop characters, and then to really help them edit the project.
Mm-hmm. What was the first project that you can remember when you switched over from being the talent to being the director?
You know, as a dancer, I wanted to be a choreographer. As a
Mm.
choreographer, I wanted to be a director. As a director, I wanted to be a producer.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always just been that fly on the wall. So I actually had my first company when I was literally 15, 16.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember getting written up in the local papers. It was called Mishy Poo Theater. And I used to dress up in costumes and read stories and sing and dance at children's birthday parties.
Oh,
So I was
cool.
entrepreneurial from a very young age. So while my friends were making, $3 to $5 an hour for babysitting, I think we're up to about $12 is now what kids get for babysitting. I was getting between 40 and 100 per hour to entertain for a party, and I would do 2 or 3 a weekend. So
Oh,
it really
wow.
helped pay for my ballet career. And then I moved to New York at a very early age to pursue my first life, which was a ballerina. And so, like gymnasts, we're very young out of the gate. We start at a very young age, and it's a very physical career. So I was pretty focused and knew what I wanted to do by a young age, and had a great career first with the Joffrey Ballet, and then working on Broadway with the creator of A Chorus Line in Dreamgirls. His name was Michael Bennett. So I learned a lot about being a multi hyphenate creator. And then I would say the first job where I really jumped from being talent into being a choreographer director that was significant was a series of videos I did for Pioneer. And it was the very early stages of what we would call professional level karaoke. So while you were singing, there would be this beautiful video that you would watch, and then you would sing along with the karaoke. And
Oh, cool.
Pioneer, yeah, put out several hundred of these. And so I got hired to direct about 30 of them. And I have to say, it was my early foray into directing music videos. And some of them to date are still absolutely beautiful. I had cinematographers, and we would go into the desert or dry lake, and I was directing actors and dancers. And then I did a series of commercials because of that as a director choreographer. So it was really fun to look at it from the quote unquote lens of being the storyteller behind the camera as opposed to being the talent on camera.
I think that's pretty cool. I was just thinking about karaoke while you were talking, and karaoke is kind of like one of those. I don't know. It's one of those things that people like, but they don't like to admit that they like it. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, because it can be totally cheesy,
Right,
you
right.
know?
But it's just a fun, way to have an evening out, or like an evening with your family or whatever. It's just kind of, yeah, it is kind of just cheesy, kind of corny, but whatever.
Yes. But this was sort of the crossover from, karaoke was always really big in Japanese, Korean, and
Right, right.
Chinese entertainment. And so when it made it more into mainstream, they started to develop these music videos that looked like something you would see on MTV or VH1.
Hmm.
I mean, they were gorgeous. So it's basically the same thing. You're telling a story, and you're basically have the words along the bottom, but the visuals were very high end.
Hmm.
And, I had considering, or relative to what the big budgets of music videos like Vogue for Madonna were, for example, they were very, very small. So it made me very scrappy in being able to find the best talent that would work for, 130, $150 for the day, as opposed to $500 or $600 for the day.
Oh, wow.
And, and finding a location. You're kind of doing things on the fly. It's what we call more guerrilla filmmaking, because we couldn't afford all the permits and the red tape. We
Hmm.
had to just go to the desert and make the video and hope we wouldn't be, stopped by some permit police.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But that
Today, I
was
think it's a lot more common too. People are like, "Oh, do you have a permit or a license for that?"
Well, truly, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
it's it's funny. We're kind of back to those days because of the quarantine. A lot of people are content creators, so they're back to those, down and dirty days. But my crossover from that allowed me to do some very high-end videos where I did have budgets of $500,000,
Oh,
and
wow.
commercials for Pringles that were $2 million budgets, and a Mazda show that had $1 million budget for an hour show. So, they're all stepping stones, and basically you're only as good as your last job.
Yeah, that's what they
So
say
yeah,
about books too. Like,
there you
you're only as
go.
good as your next book.
Right, right.
So, and that's one of the things I think working with writers and authors. It's like, you got to got to put your work out there and keep putting it out there.
And you write as well, right,
Mm-hmm.
Adam?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's one of the big things I feel like people they give up too soon. You know what I mean? Like they quit before they've actually put in a lot of. I don't know. Like they'll have maybe one or two things that they've put
Hmm.
some work in and maybe it hasn't been successful. I'm like, it's just not the way it works. I mean, like every once in a while somebody will be like an overnight sensation, but a lot of times it's not. It's just it's more of that 10-year overnight sensation, right?
Well, I would love to know how many of your readers are aspiring authors and screenwriters, because a lot of what I do too is I coach people that are aspiring. I got to speak at a few different writers conferences, and I've acquired clients from that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the things I love to do because I got into the literary agent business sort of by happenstance. I grew up in a very intellectual, effete household with very prominent writers that come from academia and journalism. But myself, I was like, really? I'm an artist, I'm an actress, I'm a dancer. What do I know about literary? And I learned so much in such a short time. I just really committed to being the best at it. And I've now had, a few really top selling books, including a children's book that's now sold 500,000 copies. And
Oh,
it's now
nice.
been published in multiple languages. So any readers that have little kids, check out The Invisible String by Patrice Karst, with incredible illustrations by Joanne Lou Vritoff. It's a great book.
That's pretty cool. So,
Yeah.
speaking of working with different people or whatever, you also work with you're talking about working with uh, podcasters and actors and dancers and now writers and things like that. What something I'd like to do sometimes, not all the time, but just based off of your background and all. What is something that you feel like with those kind of folks, because they're all not exactly the same, but in a way that they're tied into storytelling, performance,
Hmm.
visual performance, or literary works or whatever. What's something that you feel like that people, when especially when you mentioned the sales side of it earlier, that they need to understand about the transition of, hey, I can do this thing, to, hey, I'm going to sell it and put it out on the market?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Because I feel like this is a
and
difficult situation for a lot of
it,
folks.
It is. And you know what? It's why I started my platform called Passion to Power, because if I could answer that in like two different parts. The first thing is you have a passion for something, right, Adam?
Mm-hmm.
You love to write, you love to write songs, you love to sing, you love to play the guitar, you love to act or dance. The first is getting the passion. The next part is getting the training and going through the process of your journey, and through that you empower yourself and you learn the tools and tactics to succeed. And I call it creating your yellow brick road to success, so that then you are empowered and you have your power. And your power is not only your purpose and your drive, but it's all those that toolkit that you've created and the experience. And it's also that thick skin, because any type of creative endeavor requires that you understand that you're going to hear no a lot more than yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to know how to, like Wonder Woman, she could shield the bullets with her bracelets, right? Sometimes as a manager and agent, I feel like Wonder Woman. I'm taking the calls and I have to shield my clients from the nose, because it can hurt. But at the same time, I always say, when it's your time, it's your time. And there's two things you need in this industry. You need access and timing on your side.
Mm.
So you've got to have the tools. You've got to have the preparation. You've got to have the inspiration and the motivation. You've got to have the perseverance. At the end of the day, you need the access and timing. And that's what this industry is about, whether you're a writer or an actor or a screenwriter or a director or any creative, because there are cycles in the industry, and in each industry there's cycles. There's
Mm-hmm.
the time they're looking for TV pilots, the time they're doing more advertising commercials. There's the time they're selling those TV shows in New York. and showing the new wares, so to speak, you know. So with all of these different industry categories, you need to be there at the right time, the right place, and be ready, because you just never know when the opportunity comes knocking.
Yeah, I think that is a great point, and something just to add to it. I feel like is also being able to say yes to opportunities, because I think sometimes people will turn opportunities down,
Yeah,
and they think that, oh, something else is going to come along, and I'm like, well, that is your thing that came along, and maybe if it's not a good fit, then say no. But if you're just kind of like, well, I don't really know, I don't know, I'm gonna wait. Don't wait. Just keep going. Like it might be a
true.
commercial today, but then tomorrow it might be a background role, and then it might be a leading role, or it might be whatever, like the old stepping stones or whatever. I've never seen. I mean, I've literally have never seen anybody just say, "Hey, I'm the next big success," and then it's like, "Oh,
Right.
okay." It's
Well,
always
that whole saying overnight success is a myth, right? I
right,
mean,
right.
sure, it can feel like that because that one job can literally, to use the name of my company, it can zap you into a new place in your career, into a new place in the universe, into the stratosphere. Literally. I mean, look at Justin Bieber, right? He's a kid from Canada. All of a sudden he got some great opportunity and he's catapulted, and then he has to kind of catch up to his own fame and figure out who he is and an adult performer, right?
Right.
I use him as an example because he put out this song that was so riveting to me. I heard it today, about being lonely, about having everything that's perceived as stardom and success, but not having connection to certain people, because people start to be afraid to tell you the truth when you've reached a certain level of prominence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's also really important to have people that will give you that authentic yes and no, and also why, and give you critical analysis and support you. You don't want to just be around those people who tell you how great you are all
Oh
day.
yeah, yeah.
So while you're getting those stepping stones, I think your advice to say yes is a really good advice, a good piece of advice. And I have made it my mandate in the last year to say yes. In fact, I have little sticky notes on my desk that just say yes, because I'm at a place in my career where I can be very picky. On the other hand, I feel like I'm morphing into my next life, and definitely, to use that business term, pivot. I've made like triple pirouettes and pivots,
Right,
and
right.
I continue to do so, because you never know, if I go sideways, chasse kickball change, I might learn something completely new and meet somebody I would never meet that could put me in a new place.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be open, you
Yeah,
know?
I think that's a great point. We've got to do the station announcements real
Okay.
quick. Michelle, we'll be back
Hmm.
in a couple minutes. Everybody, thank you for tuning in today. My special guest, Michelle Zeitlin, is sharing her wealth of knowledge with us about the entertainment industry. And so I really appreciate that, Michelle. It's wonderful.
Spring on-air fundraising campaign because we need your support.
All of the in-person fundraising events we normally have throughout the year have been canceled because of the coronavirus. Supporting WRUU with your financial gift is very important to us and could be one of the most affordable things you do today. When you make a $10 per month donation, you're spending much less on WRUU than you spend on cable or streaming services. When you make a one-time contribution of $107.50, that's less than you might spend on a pair of concert tickets or dinner for two at a nice restaurant. And you'll get the added benefit of WRUU lasting the whole year round. Compare WRUU to some of the other things that you value in your life, like daily coffee and your favorite snacks, and you'll discover that there are lots of reasons to value WRUU with a gift at our premium level, which works out to about 30 cents a day. Go to WRUU.org and make a financial contribution that fits within your budget. And thanks for supporting Savannah's best local talk radio as voted by readers in the most recent Connect Savannah poll, WRUU 107.5 FM.
And for the first 3 donors who give a first or new donation of $500 or more will receive a limited edition painted record. We are...
All right, here is Sebastian Messer, everybody, playing live in the studio. Awesome, Bass. Thank you very much. Terry and Darlene Dremel said, "Go Bass, go." So they enjoyed it. All right, we are back. Thank you, Michelle, for hanging in with us on the radio today. It's kind of fun. I talk with different authors, artists, and entertainers. And when you were talking about being a multi-hyphenate earlier, just kind of, could you, for the audience at home, would you mind kind of just giving an overview of what you mean by multi-hyphenate?
Yeah, it's funny too because I'm looking at your alliteration of Muse's memoirs and more. If we
That was
could
the first name
combine,
of my radio show.
yeah, I love that because the name of my company is More Zap.
Yeah, there you go.
ZAP. And I always, when people are on the phone and they're like, "What did she say? What did she say?" I was like, "Zebra, apple, pickle, more." So if anyone would like to check out my website, it's morezap.com. The word more of something, and then zebra, apple, pickle, zap, like a zap of lightning. And originally, I started my company as a development company for big events, what we would call big stage spectaculars that were for Fortune 500 companies. So I worked with Nike for 12 years, creating their live shows, basically huge themed fashion shows with Magic Johnson and Air Jordan and incredible. And it was a combining of dance, choreography, sports, monologues. And I loved doing that. I also worked with De Beers Diamonds on creating big shows to present their diamond lines. We went to Texas, Vancouver, New York, Vegas. And then I morphed my company into a talent management company after a 2-year foray as a Hollywood agent. So I became an agent, BBA, where I came in as the director of dance and choreography and eventually was also handed other departments, the equity department, which is also known as Actors Equity Association. It's a union for stage performers. And that crossed into the music division. So ultimately, I ended up working with all kinds of talent. And I worked for that agency for 2 years. In a very short time, I was quite successful I literally tripled their revenue in the first few months I was there because it is such a niche market. And I think you really need to know the kind of talent that you're representing and be an expert on it. And the person that had held the position before me, while being a good agent, didn't really know the world of dance and choreography and theater and music, which is my world. And having been a buyer on the outside and knowing this agency for many years, I was able to kind of rebuild the department and bring it back. But after 2 years, I decided I wanted to go back to my own company and take the skills and some of the clients that I had met and represented, but go back to managing. And managing allowed me to be creative as well, because when you are an agent, you're doing a lot of talent fulfillment. You're putting people into roles. You're doing a lot of negotiating, closing deals, and asking for money. As a manager, it became a little more creative for me. I could use my producer hat. I could be involved with the development of projects, and I could use the other tools, not just my sales acumen, but my writing tools, my pitching tools, and also coming up with ideas. So literally today with my company, with her, she comes with a wealth of hosting experience, and we want to figure out now, having come off
Michelle, the part that you mentioned the person's name, that blanked out for a second. So who was that you said?
Oh, I'm sorry. Her name is actually Stephanie Del Valle.
Okay,
She's
Thank
Miss
you.
World Puerto Rico 2016, and she actually held the crown for the 2-year reign because she's kind of like an Angelina Jolie from Puerto Rico. She's like 5'11", absolutely gorgeous. And what made me so excited about her is that she really is a beauty with a purpose. And that was her reign, was to go to different countries, impoverished nations, and try to bring good education and support and recognition to these areas. And so now we're figuring out creatively what's next for Miss World and where can we place her as a host, as a voiceover actress. She's a singer breaking into Broadway. So with her, it's like a wide open a wide open white wall. I get to kind of create ideas and throw darts at the board, and it's really creative because we can start at the very early stage. With some of my clients, they've been in the business a long time, and it's more about making the right decisions, like we were talking about, where it wouldn't be right for them to do a little background
Hmm.
work or a commercial, because we have to leverage all of their experience and credits to get them to the next level. So, for example, I have a client who just worked on Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is an incredible credit. And she was on camera with major stars. I'm not allowed to divulge who they are yet.
Right, right.
And the creator of the show, Larry David. And, compared to the other actors on the show, she's an up and comer. They're really established actors. So she was sending me selfies to my phone with these incredible actors. And I
Yeah.
was just smelling, like some of the actors that I'm a fan of. So it's really exciting to work with different clients at different stages of their career. And by the way, that client's name is Ashley with an I, Ashley Aguilard, and she's also from the South. She's from Louisiana originally. She likes to say she's from the original LA, and now she's in LA.
From LA to LA. There you go. Yeah.
So
So,
I have awesome clients. Yeah.
going back to the multi hyphenate aspect of all these different things, you have developed, and that's something that I think is interesting. When you're talking about talent, when you're the talent, doesn't necessarily mean you're talented. I actually had a guest one time that I was like, "Oh, you're very talented," and they were kind of offended by it because they're like, "Well, I've spent all these years in being skilled and da, da, da." And I'm like, when you said the talent, like I think of the face of the organization,
Uh-huh.
and like the poster person or whatever. That doesn't mean that they're talented or skillful or whatever, and there are different levels of talent. You have
Yes.
entry level, you have people who have raw natural ability that it comes with their personality or whatever, or
Right.
they might have done a play like when they were in first grade and they had just some kind of je ne sais quoi, I don't know what,
Right.
to
Yes.
that, whatever. And so I feel like it's an interesting thing because when you're talking about being a multi hyphenate, it's developing different skills into a mastery level and then implementing those skills, kind of like what you're saying, where you've leveraged these different things, because you're a dancer and then, performer and all these other, entrepreneur and all these other things. And I feel the same way because they just kind of stack, and it's like, well, this aspect, I do this, and it kind of augments or helps this one area. And then something else stacks, and it just kind of works together. And I feel like the folks that are talented, just to use the word loosely, are the ones
Mm-hmm.
who put the work in developing those skill sets, and then
Yes.
also learning and going and growing as they go. Because I'm sorry, excuse me, we've all met those folks that we're kind of like, they're kind of like the know-it-all, and you can't tell them anything, and they're like, everything that you say, they're like, they one up you or whatever. We all know those kind of folks. Those are not the kind of folks I'm talking about, because there are people like that are talented, that like whatever, but at the same time, it's kind of like, when they're arrogant or they're haughty, it's almost takes away from the polish and shine of their skills, right?
Right.
I love the folks that they are constantly trying to improve, and and they're gathering new skills, or like with you, you're always trying to meet new people and facilitate or assist them with their journey, and that's one of the things like I liked when I was talking with Dr. Scott, was like, okay, this guy seems like the genuine deal, you know what I mean, like, because you meet a lot of
Right.
folks, and he just seems so authentic and sincere. Jason Usry was the one who introduced me to him. He was the one who introduced me to you, and here we are talking on the radio today. You know what I mean?
And that's a big part of my business. Going back to multi hyphenate,
Yeah.
it is knowing how to connect dots.
Right. Right.
I mean, it's funny because I used to have a tag on my phone and my email that said concept creation coordination. That was when I was in the event business. And then I used the tag, we develop people and projects. And now I say I'm a creative catalyst to conversation, because ultimately that dot connecting is a big part of my multi hyphen itself.
Mm-hmm.
I have the experience. I've been in front of the camera. I've been behind the camera. I'm good at looking even from the top down.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to reach out to people to interview them from the top down. It's funny. I've had such exciting interviews on my Passion to Power podcast because I do go to the president first, and then I get cleared and vetted by his team. But I'll first go to the president, he
Right.
or she. And I learned that from my mom, who was a journalist, how to get in the room and how to open a door. And I've always been that person that's fearless to open a door on behalf of my talent. And it's easier for me to sell other people even than more than myself,
Right. Right.
because when I believe in someone, I'm wholeheartedly committed. And that's why people work with me and tend to stay with me for a long time with my company, because they see the results, but they also see the passion and drive that I have for their careers.
Right.
And then it's such a great, when it works, it's so great because I shout out to another client of mine. Her name is Emily Allaby, and we're going into our 6th year of working together. She did a couple amazing commercials. One was a Super Bowl commercial. It literally came from a self-tape 2 days before she got the job, that she was on the set. And that was such an awesome job to have just before the end of the year. And she's had such massive success because of the trust and because of her ability to take direction, like you were saying about those know-it-alls,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What I like is working with people who are like sponges and like clay, and
Right.
they have all the talent, but they need someone to give them a little nuance here, a little push here, a little gentle tug there. And that's the relationship I have with most of my clients. And Emily's a great example of that, because she has just gone from literally no TV credits to starring in Marvel TV series,
Oh
to
wow.
starring in an MTV series, her first Hallmark movie where she, had a starring role. And then we were just up for a pilot that was shooting in Australia. It was down to 2 women. And all of her skills needed to be fine-tuned, and also how she auditioned needed to be fine-tuned. And she's such a good auditioner now, because during the pandemic, a lot of people have reverted to self-tape auditions, and there's rarely an in-the-room audition these days with casting directors.
Right.
So I think being a multi-hyphenate means being very skilled and talented at different areas of the business. But also, I think it's important when you're starting out to focus on one area and
Yeah.
become an expert first in that area. Get the training and the tools and commitment. And then when you've created a little hub for yourself, that's where you start to take a next step and then go, okay, now I'll move sideways, or I'll move to the left, I'll move to the right, and
That's a
try
good
some
point.
new things. But I do think it's first important to get an anchor rather than try to be, what do they say? Be a king of all skills, because it kind of dilutes what you could really be expert at. And then you can gain traction little by little and try new things,
Yeah, that's
you
a good
know?
point. Everybody, you're tuning in today to WRU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. I think it's a really good point, Michelle, because I've seen the same thing, because I just started a small print publishing company, and
Ah,
working like last year. It's kind of weird. The name started last year. I started it back in 2016, but I started publishing last year, and working with different authors. It is kind of like one of those things where you're like, okay, well, you want somebody to you have to have, like you said, your foundational thing, right? You have to have the
right.
foundational thing that people know you for. In writing, for example, people are used to someone writing one genre. So like if they write, you know, cozy beach novels, for example, if they were to
Mm-hmm.
try to switch to sci-fi after their first novel, and they're expecting like the next cozy beach novel, they're gonna, their reader base are gonna be like, well, what is this? This is not, the
Mm-hmm.
cozy beach novel that I wanted. Kind of like with actors, you see actors a lot of times where I think of different ones that they switched from like action to comedy, or when they switched from comedy to like drama, things like that, where sometimes it's worked out really well, and then other times it hasn't, right? And
Right.
I feel like that consumers or the audience or whatever, that we kind of expect certain things or whatever, and if we know somebody for a certain thing, then we're not necessarily going to say no to their new thing if we like them, right? But at the
Right.
same time, if we are like, well, let me give you a chance on this thing, and then they're not really good at it. And I think this is what I think of when I think about that. I think about sports. When Michael Jordan wanted to play Major League Baseball,
Right.
best basketball player of his time, and some people will argue of all time, but
Right.
definitely the best one of his time. But when he played Major League Baseball, it just was not his sport. And and here Michael Jordan's like one of my favorite people, but there
Right.
were so many people who were critics of him when he played baseball because he just was not a superstar.
Right.
But then you have other folks like Deion Sanders who played football and baseball, or like Bo Jackson who played football and baseball. And so sometimes it does work and sometimes it doesn't. I feel like it just kind of it goes back to that mastery or that talent or that skill or whatever you want to call it. Uh, for example, Robin Williams was one of my favorite actors.
Aw,
I
yeah.
I grew up watching him on Mork and Mindy.
Yep.
And
Of course.
I saw him on Happy Days, and
Nanu, nanu.
Nanu Nanu, right? And then like, a lot of the younger kids, they would recognize maybe Jumanji,
Right.
but he also had other more serious roles,
Mm-hmm.
that people were kind of like, "Well, this isn't Robin Williams. This isn't like, I'm not used to him being, serious and, being, depressed or, acting, down and sad." And, so that's a question I have for you, with your, we got about 5 minutes left, but that's a question I have for you working with your different, folks for your agency or whatever. And you're really good at being able to say, okay, well, here's an opportunity coming up. This is something that's in the pipeline. This might work for you, or might not work for you, or whatever. How do you kind of filter that? I mean, I know that there's not like a magic formula, but how do you it seems like you try to get to know your folks first, and then you try
Mm-hmm.
to put them together. But how do you manage that? Because I mean, like, you can't just say, hey, this person is gonna, like, like you were saying about with the young lady, where she's gone from not doing anything to doing all these different movies. And
Right, Emily. Yeah.
right. And how do you kind of, you as the manager or whatever, the agent, how do you kind of marry those things together?
Okay, well, before I answer that question, I do want to say for your younger listeners who may know Robin Williams for his more recent,
Or like
very
Aladdin
comedic.
was another one he was in.
Yeah, yeah, but everyone should check out Good Will Hunting because
Yeah, it was
it was
amazing.
it was an award-winning script. Ben Affleck and Matt Damon wrote the script and ended up winning an Academy Award for it. And it was produced by Lawrence Bender. And, there's Robin Williams playing a psychiatrist, which is not the role you would normally associate with him, and
Hmm.
it's just such a touching film. So I highly recommend everybody check it out. It's a
That was
great
actually the
indie.
role I was thinking of when I was talking about, like,
Oh,
like
there you
darker side.
go.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. It's such a great relationship they have on camera too, Matt Damon and Robin Williams. I'm a huge fan. So how do I marry the skills of my clients and nurture their careers and know how to drive them in certain directions? Is that the question?
Yeah, that, and then figure out which opportunities or which different openings are a good fit.
Well, I think it really comes down to the client. So I have a couple clients that, like we were talking about, the say yes.
Hmm.
Pretty much anything I think that they're right for in their lane, I'm going to submit them and hope they get an audition, because I feel like the experience of getting on camera, learning the script, memorizing, learning the skills of self-tapes are so important that it's worth just trying to get out there. So I'll probably have a wider net for certain clients that I consider my more developmental clients. And then there are certain clients where I feel like they're at a place now where they're almost offer only. They're before offer only, which is where they don't audition, they just get an offer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's creating those relationships with not only casting directors, but going and having relationships with directors and producers and getting my actors to be on their radar. For example, this week I had a conversation with a producer that works with Kevin Hart. Well, my client who was just on Curb Your Enthusiasm, she should be working with Kevin Hart. So somehow I will manipulate and create and manifest that. And that's part of my job, is to take the skill set of certain clients and know that they have to go into these boxes, into these companies. It's like when you talked about the book, right? You talked about the sci-fi versus the cozy mystery. So these are what we call categories, and certain categories in the book business would go to different imprints. So while you have a giant publisher like Random House, right, or Hachette, they have individual imprints that focus on, like a Thomas Mercer is more like a crime novel,
Mm-hmm.
or a children's novel with Little Brown. So we, as the literary reps, we know that we spend our time researching that. So when an author comes, we know where to plug them in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who would be interested in reading their book. So the same with casting directors. I have relationships that are 30 years long with some casting directors. Some are really new. Some were assistants who are moving into bigger jobs. And when a new show is on the market and I want my client in front of them, I can pick up the phone and say, hey, Allison, I know we worked together 5 years ago when you were an assistant at VH1, and now you're casting your own show. This happened this week, and I've got the exact person for your show. You don't even need to go through the submissions. This is going to make your job so easy. And I sent her the person, and the person was booked that day.
Nice. I think that's a great point to end the show on, because we're at the end of the time. I thank you so much, Michelle, for being on the show today. You said that people can check out your information at the Zap. Can you say it again? The website, the Zap website.
There's two places you can find me. There's three places, but if you're looking for coaching and consulting and you want to learn how to identify your creative and find those skills, whether you're a writer or a speaker or even a real estate person and need to learn how to kind of have the cachet value to market yourself, then I suggest checking out passion-power.com. It's passion with a hyphen, like we talked about, multi-hyphenate, passion-power.com. And that's also the name of my podcast, which you can find on Spotify,
Oh, great.
Apple, and all the indies.
That
and
was
we
wonderful.
might, Adam, we'll have to do a do-si-do, and maybe we'll have you on my show.
Oh, I'd love that. That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be so cool. And then for people who are interested in booking my talent or learning more about the different productions we're developing, please check out morezap.com, which is MOREZ like zebra, A like apple, P like pickle.com, and Morzap Productions and Management, or Morzap Talent and Literary. I'm also on Publishers Marketplace, which is kind of the go-to if you're looking for an agent for your book. And I have a list of all the authors I work with and the successful books that we placed in
Awesome.
multiple genres, fiction and nonfiction.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.